Welcome back to the TESTPILOT Podcast. This is episode 2, or better say, part 2 of the episode with Dave Weagle. In the first one, we got cut off by a power blackout. So we will dive back into what the program linkage design can do and cannot. We will talk about how he decides and develops kinematics together with his customers, like the different bike brands out there. We will talk about the similarities between a coffee machine and suspension setup, how too much nerd talk about kinematics affected his sales, and a bonus, a 17-year-old Ironhorse Sunday I recently bought. So, welcome and enjoy the second part of this episode. And don't forget to subscribe for more nerd content like this. Is you have a generator running, or do you have?
No, we're good. Power's back. I don't know what that was. It just was out. It was out till like 2 p.m. though, or like something like that. 1 p.m. It was off for a long time. I left the house and went and did errands.
I don't know if you remember where we stopped.
Yep.
We stopped right away when you explained that we were talking about the differences of your different suspension systems, and even though it's all out of your hand idea, still though they feel very different.
Yep.
So the question was how you decide on what or how a suspension or how a complete bike, the kinematics of it should feel when working with the different brands you're working with.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, I would say that there has been an element of convergent design for my designs over time. And I think, like, if you're a historian of what has happened in mountain bike suspension in the last 20 years, like, there's been somewhat of a level of convergent design towards the stuff that I did early on, realistically, especially in terms of like leverage ratios. I literally made the idea of you looking at anti-squat versus, travel. Like, that was something, I was my own lexicographer in that regard. So obviously everything in the industry was converging that way because,
it makes sense.
It has to. But I would say, just early on, I spent a lot of time riding with the people that, the companies that I've, chose to work with. And I chose to work with, a few, and I, for one reason or another, wasn't able to work with many. There were a lot of opportunities, I'd say, over time that I just couldn't take, whatever, whether it's from time or just maybe I didn't feel like it wasn't the right fit or whatever. But, I think for the brands that I did find, I felt like there was a good fit, tried to understand what they wanted out of a product and kind of, I tried to find people that I try. Let me say this differently. I said yes to people who I felt had their own kind of somewhat segregated, more unique taste on how a mountain bike should ride, knowing full well that I could achieve what they wanted from a feel standpoint in their own unique way. But over time, what happened is that the marketplace really moved closer to some of the things that I really wanted to popularize, especially kind of early on in the Ironhorse days, the progressive, the more progressive leverage ratios, being able to push off the bike and pump the terrain to generate speed, higher levels of anti-squat, which have a bunch of benefits down the line. Some of the frame stiffness stuff that's kind of associated with specific structural layouts. And so over time, what happened is that most of my partners kind of ended up moving more towards the direction that I preferred as opposed to what they preferred. So now I think there's a lot of similarity in the products that, I've been bringing to market with my different partners, probably with the notable exception of maybe the Esker Orion product, which is quite a different formula to get there than, say, like what I've done with Pivot, Ibis, Evil, Turner in the past, Atherton, you name it, a bunch of other brands, all the, the split pivot guys way, 15 years ago, 12 years ago. So yeah, I mean, I still think that the vast majority of products in the marketplace are, in a bit of a different area from a performance envelope standpoint than where most of my partners are. But clearly and some of the layouts, the suspension layouts out there, you just can't achieve you can't achieve what we're able to achieve with a DW Link or an Orion product or, DW4, 6, whatever. They all have their own kind of compromises that you have to make in the development, right? So, we'll always have our own little unique spot in that area. And I don't think it really comes down to anything having to do with patents or anything like that. It really just comes down to implementation, which is sometimes significantly more challenging or nuanced than at first glance.
What I find the most impressive is we were touching on that slightly in the first episode on this, is if you're looking into a car, a vehicle which weighs about 2 tons, and then you have rarely any interaction with the sprung mass versus the unsprung mass. And on bikes, as you've mentioned, you push the bike, you pump the bike. And this force means, like, weight-wise, you're making yourself heavier. You're making an impulse from the top, which is something very hard to counterforce in a kinematics. So if you look at a curve of the kinematics, and this is something, if you maybe a little bit of a bike nerd, linkage, the program, and you maybe have had a look at the curves some different companies putting out there, because you can measure it somewhat, but let's touch on that later. But what stands out is, like, your kinematics somewhat stand out in a way that the force needed to get to a certain amount of travel is mostly a little bit higher than the others, which could translate to, if you push the bike with, I don't know, let's say 300, 400 Newton, whatever, X force.
Yep.
And then a kinematic which you come up with may, squat or compresses to, let's just make up numbers here, 40%, while a different product might go to 50 or 60%, which makes it more of what you call maybe a wallowy ride.
Correct.
And then, even though it's more complex and you have to put in a shock and this has low speed compression and you have a different setting in there and you can increase the PSI or whatever you're making a volume spacer in, I think it's crucial that if you want to have a product that is able to be a tool for an active rider and you want to pop off stuff and you want to have, it reacts to your input, rather than just being like a passive kind of vehicle like car.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's an extension of your body for sure, which is why, I go back to kind of starting off and understand who the people are that and how they ride that, I'm working with. And the same thing goes with the World Cup downhill bike. I mean, different riders use the bike in a completely different way. I mean, just a perfect example of this, like working with the Atherton team recently, like their riders are on completely different geometry. They're literally riding the bike completely differently. Like, the bikes are different. They look the same. If the untrained eye, they are the same, but they're not the same, And if they were the same, then both riders would be slower, And it's the same thing. And I think, like, we talk about the balance of performance and kind of how you arrive at whatever that end feel is, like on kind of my baking cake analogy, right? Like, you can achieve, in theory, in a static moment, the same force output. But with, say, more damping and less spraying and less spraying and more damping, for a really super oversimplification. But they feel, in reality, completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'll say too, like, anybody who's designing bikes with the linkage software is completely kidding themselves. Like, that's preschool. Like, you are so far behind the curve. If you're looking at linkage to design a bike, forget about it. You're just guessing. Might as well just guess, because you're probably better off.
In the past, I had often the discussion that, like, in forums, when you put out reviews as an editor, and you as an editor with a little bit of an experience, you develop a feel, and you should be able to describe what the bike is doing under yourself, and you can put it in somewhat of a drawer and explain the use case of the bike. Like this is more for an active rider, or how it pops off an obstacle if you pump it, or if it just is made to plow over stuff, being for more like a less active rider, or you ride it from, I would say, like steer it with the back wheel, or just being centered over it, or over the bars, like more in front attack position. Like different brands, different sizes have different approaches to it. And you brought up like saying linkage or linkage program is somewhat of preschool. I dug deep into that topic and played with it, and it gives you somewhat of an idea, but it's so misleading at some point.
Exactly.
That
I actually
like
love it. I think it's great because it gives me such great job security.
Like, it provides you a wrong sense of security or a wrong sense of understanding, I would say, because especially like one point, you have like a center of mass in the virtual point over the bike, moving backward, forward, and sideways in 3 axes, X, Y, Z, and this program can't deal with this kind of dynamic onto a bike.
Yeah, it's just it's so much more complicated, and the real problem is so much more complicated. It's just such a gross oversimplification. You know, when you look at that software, I don't know if you know the story of this, but that was actually requisitioned by IBIS as initially a feature for their initial website when they launched the DW Link bikes, to show why a DW Link was better than whatever else thing. And then they decided not to lay it out, and the account regularly like ended up making it and selling it to people as like some kind of tool to like analyze suspensions. But like it was based off the original, the very first DW Link patents, where we were describing the shape of an anti-squat curve and very specifically not describing the magnitude of an anti-squat curve, like how much anti-squat you're developing. So like, I mean, it's just completely inaccurate and wrong and just flawed in so many ways. But hey, I mean, whatever, it is what it is, you know. I mean, people seem to have fun with it, and you know, I mean, you can get to building something that works really well empirically. Like I think there have been quite a few people that have proved that over time. You know, you don't need to start off and calculate what something's going to do and, you know, go from that direction. That's just kind of the direction that I've chosen. But, you know, you can clearly just start putting holes in things and riding it, and eventually you get there. It just takes a really freaking long time, and you might not actually get all the way there until you stumble on the, you know, your best solution, right? It's just a lot harder to do stuff empirically like that.
Would you say that if you would have a bike brand that is able to change the curves depending on your rider weight?
Yep. I mean, that was what Robot was. Like, that's exactly what Robot Bike Company was. That's what Atherton, you know, in theory could do. But I think, Jens, that there is probably a very, very, very small subset of riders, who would be willing to go through the entire process and get a product that has that and actually enjoy it. And the vast majority of riders it's too much. It's too complicated. It's too much BS. It's too confusing. And like, they just want to ride their bike and get something. And it's just, you know, if their buddy has X bike, like they just want to ride the bike that their buddy's got and go out and ride some trails. They don't care. And I think that's completely cool. And I mean, you know, it's, I think for a lot of people that are like kind of more into the nuance of anything, motorsport, you know, freaking bikes, whatever it is, you know, coffee, like it's probably more of a burden realistically, you know, like if you could just go and have some shitty cup of coffee and be like, yeah, good coffee, you know, it's probably like a lot easier, you know? So,
or you could get a machine and you couldn't get a grinder and you figure out the coffee, the grinding style, like how much pressure you apply, the pressure of the water, everything. It's the same. I find it kind of interesting because if you look at a good coffee machine and an espresso machine, when I got one a couple of years back, I started to compare it to suspension design.
Yeah,
it's the same,
Yep.
Maybe that's some, because in the bike, not in the bike industry, but in like people, bikers often like coffee. Maybe we
Yep.
should like point them towards coffee and explain suspension and kinematics via coffee.
Man, I am not a coffee guru, so I do have a buddy though who is pretty damn impressive with that stuff. I mean, he's grinding his own beans and roasting them and you name it, man. He's
Oh,
all the way in, all the way in.
okay, roasting the own
That's a whole
beans.
different. That's a whole. But I mean, it's the same kind of thing, So I think like, we geek out about the nuance of the performance of these products. But I think it's the vast majority of people that are riding, I think, like care far less about this than we do. They just want to go and ride it, and it performs well. And I think that's like been the big goal for me over time, is just to build stuff that you don't have to dick around with. You just freaking throw a leg over it. Like, it doesn't have to be set up completely perfectly to a T. Like, it'll pretty much work with a wide range of settings. You just get on it and go. And if you choose to set up your rebound, hey, that's great. And if you choose to even get even further and, maybe pump up your spring to the right weight for you, even better, and set up your fork and your sag. I mean, these are all positives,
Yeah. Do you think that during the pandemic, a lot of people got into bikes that maybe are a little bit older, maybe not as super nerdy? Because in the 90s, we had like more the freaks were the mountain bikers.
Yeah.
Now it became more and more mainstream. And yes, you said mainstream means you need to simplify things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't really know the demographic number. Like, I don't have any like real, I guess, demographic information to draw on. It certainly seems like just, from a observational standpoint that, that cycling became more mainstream and mountain biking became more mainstream, post 2020. But I hope that everyone stays, at the sport. I think it's an awesome sport. I think it's, something you can do for most of your life. And, it's something you get outside and get some fresh air. And, that's better than a lot of stuff, but yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's always going to be those subsets, like I said, in anything, whether it's coffee or, baking cakes, whatever. Some people are just going to buy the box mix and make the cake. And some people are going to go into the supermarket and get some eggs and some baking soda and, baking powder and start, whipping up some custom cake, right? It's everything in life, and so I think the products that we're building mostly now are catering to the people that are more on the, on the nuanced kind of the really fully focused side of the sport. But, I mean, there have been plenty of products, a story of a big part of my history developing product that most people don't even know about. I mean, we did like hundreds of thousands of Walmart, like bikes that were sold in Sport Check, Sport Chalet through the side of, Ironhorse's sister company, Worldwide Cycle. Tons and tons and tons of bikes. It's all kinds of single pivot, short travel, even downhill bikes. We opened up a downhill bike line in China, 2005 or something. And I mean, those bikes, the suspension goes up and down. Like, you can go down the trail. Like, it might not have the best shock in history, but they work. They did work well. I mean, I rode all those bikes. It's so. I think the most of the same benefits apply across the boards, and doesn't matter what kind of rider you are. And my hope is, I think that the more that better performance matriculates across the industry, the more riders who start off will have a good experience and stay with it, as opposed to like leaving the sport and going to do something else. Because
I think all the bikes are pretty darn good right now.
I mean, I think they are, but they were horrible. There was only a few that were even somewhat rideable when I started riding. And I think like, honestly, like, no knock. It's just reality. Like, if we were stuck with like the garbage that like Trek or Specialized or whatever was building in 1999, like the bike industry wouldn't be even close to where it is today. Like,
if
we didn't make those bikes pedal, it wouldn't exist.
Imagine you would take one of the current bikes, like 2024 model, travel back in time, and you would crush everybody. The technical advantages.
I will say that the meteoric rise of Ironhorse, which was destroyed just due to, well, literally because of embezzlement. I mean, it's actually what happened. But that company, I mean, I've never worked with a company that grew that quickly. I mean, they were like a $2 million company, went to a $50 million company in a couple of years, which is nuts. I mean, they were still selling more bikes in 2007 than anybody I work with right now.
It was a kind of a boom back then.
Yeah, I mean, but still, I mean, that's crazy considering the scope of the size of the industry now.
True.
Like the market share that they grabbed in a span of 2.5 years, 3 years was just insane.
You want to hear a fun story?
Yeah.
4 weeks ago, I went on kind of the German Craigslist, and I got a Ironhorse Sunday.
No way.
In large.
Heck
for
yeah,
$800.
Sweet. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and then it was in prime condition, literally prime conditions. The guy, he the wheels were brand new. There were not even a scratch in it.
That's crazy.
A black anodized frame, 26-inch wheels.
Sick, dude.
And then the tires were completely hard, like a table. Insane. But here it comes. Fun story. I was dragging it out, getting it to the local bike park, and I had a couple of youngsters here I'm protéging. And then I was like, okay, you got to ride this one. And it was wrong spring rate. It's not easy to change the spring on this bike, but nonetheless,
no, it's not.
I don't know, 60 kilo youngster, 13, 14 years old, and he was riding the bike, and I was going behind him. You wouldn't imagine. He was right out of the gate, hauling ass on it. And then, I mean, this is 26-inch. It's 17 years old now, kind of.
Every bit of it, yeah.
And he was at the bottom. You should have seen his face. He was blown away. It was so different than what he rode all the time, and he had different kids bikes, full suspension, and cheaper brands. But this old bike blew him away. That was impressive.
That's freaking cool, man. What shock was on it?
The RC, was it called RC4 Fox?
Yeah.
The one
okay.
You could adjust the pressure in the IFP.
So take the freaking blue cap. There's an Allen key on the side of that little blue cap on the knob there.
Yeah.
On the reservoir.
Yeah.
I think it takes a 17 millimeter socket. Just get a long 17 millimeter socket and drive the gas chamber down another freaking turn and a half
to shorten the IFP.
Yeah, just you throw the cap away.
I did it.
Whatever. Yeah, that's important to do on that bike. That bike. It's an interesting one. It's obviously, I don't know if you can see this thing next to me, but whatever. I can't see my own screen, but I have some pretty serious technology that I use here to characterize dampers and stuff like that, and data acquisition and all that stuff. And that was early on. Obviously, I didn't own a shock dyno at that point, so I was literally sending dynos to a stock car team in North Carolina to run dampers for me to understand, just literally characterize springs and dampers, because Fox didn't have air spring curves at all available. I don't think they even calculated them. They're just making it,
Yeah.
So pretty early, I was a big off-road guy. I was a big fan of trophy trucks and class 10 and class 1 and all that stuff. And so I was familiar with the Kernut patents. And so when Fifth Element, when Roy Turner started using those patents in the Fifth Element, I was pretty intrigued. But Roy really had a brilliant idea to use that for for a low speed compression increase. But my interest wasn't in using a low speed compression increase. I literally bastardized the shock, and on the Fifth Element used the biggest possible. Basically I used it in the way that they did for the trophy trucks. And so that's why the Sunday was really engineered to work with that Fifth Element shock. They were concurrently developed to work together.
I need to find one, I guess.
It works great with the DHX. You just got to do what I said there. Yeah. It's just a little different. I mean, the DHX does have a Kernut, a pressure sensitive valve in it. It's just a different implementation. It's on the, it's in the base valve as opposed to the piston. So, it's a little more finicky off the base valve because the pressures are higher and all that. But, yeah, can be made to work.
How come you never developed a shock?
I have.
You mean they have like the shock in the thrust fork, for instance?
Yeah, but it developed rear shocks as well. And I did a lot of work over the years with Fox, and I've spent a lot of time talking with the SRAM guys. Obviously, a lot of my contacts at this point have moved up in the companies, so they're not like in the engineering level anymore; they're more in the management level. But my hand has been in a lot of damper development and a lot of just kind of common sense stuff like hardware issues and things like that, just trying to push that stuff along. But I've developed, obviously the truss stuff we did, which was a pretty freaking wild damper as far as the bike industry goes, like way
true shaft stock. I'm wondering, Track did this with like, how's it called? Penske?
Yep.
And then
Penske did. Yep.
But it never really became a thing in mountain biking.
I think implementation is everything, like I think it's really what it comes down to in anything. Dampers are really complex. So we also developed some rear shock stuff for Trust, which was badass. And I think could have some features that haven't been seen in mountain biking yet for sure, that I think would have been pretty impressive, but not to go into today. But yeah, done it. It's fun. I enjoyed doing it. But it's building dampers at any real volume, at any real production scale is really freaking expensive. And
hard.
It's hard to make money doing it unless you're at really high volume because the margin is low.
I would say if you figure something out and you make the kinematics and you're making the shock specifically to the kinematics, it could be like heaven on earth.
We've been doing that forever. That's what we did with Trust, obviously, but been doing that forever with. Back in the day, trying to get a damper for a DW Link was really hard. And the common question always from all the dampering always, why do we need less rebound damping? Like, why? It doesn't make any sense. Like, why do we need less rebound damping with your design versus another? Like, why do I need a low rebound tube? And it wasn't that we necessarily needed less; it's that the other designs needed more because they were deficient. Because they needed extra spring to deal with their crazy wallowy leverage ratios and stuff like that, or just maybe not even know what their leverage ratios were. And so it originally, I'm talking 2001, 2002, it was so hard to get any damper that would work on the products I was designing or I wanted to develop because everything was being made for just radically different, radically different performance envelopes, just different leverage ratios. But like I said earlier, the market has definitely moved towards my side of the coin, I guess. And so now it's whatever, we can make anything work because nobody's doing I shouldn't say nobody, but there are still the outliers that are, running crazy, weird leverage ratios and stuff. But more people have moved to at least somewhat linear, let alone, So yeah, it's easier now. And the dampers have gotten better in general. And I think we've sat here and talked about, leverage ratios and anti-squat and all that stuff. And frankly, dude, those are just driven metrics. I don't care about those. They become what they need to become to get the job done. I'm not sitting there I'm not busting out the linkage program and being oh, I'm going to put my pivots here and I'm going to see what the leverage ratio is. I don't care about that. It's irrelevant.
What can you talk about the process you're doing here or how you come up?
I'll just say that there's the metrics that I'm looking at are not the metrics that anybody else I know are really looking at. They drive the measurables that we talk about for communication of, the simplification of communication to, media or consumers or whatever, But I learned super early on, back in the very beginning DW Link days, I would go to, we would have symposiums at the trade shows and I would, Eurobike and Interbike and, Taipei show. And I would sit there and talk to whoever wanted to come, about all the stuff, anti-squat and leverage ratio, stuff that nobody had ever heard of. It was what is this this guy is just talking about crazy stuff that.
Yeah, you sound like a mad scientist.
I swear to God, when I start talking would be here and sales is like this. And then I stop talking, and they start going back up, and then I start talking again, and the sales just right back down again. Nobody
Yeah. Just give me something easy. Like it's
Yeah.
the bestest
Yeah.
performance, whatever.
Yeah, it's like attaching a freaking uranium freaking rock to to sales numbers.
Yeah. I think in the industry you have. I don't want to like oversimplify it, but it's somehow sometimes you feel like, okay, just slap the performance sticker on it and claim its performance, whatever this may be, and just that's it.
Welcome to the vast majority of the bike industry, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And sadly today, you used to be able to combat it back in the day, and I was pretty I was on a pretty serious quest on that one for a while. But today with direct marketing, with Facebook targeted advertising and things like that, TikTok and you name it, the way that companies can get their message across, it's impossible to combat. Like they can tell any customer anything they want. It doesn't need to be factual. It doesn't need to be truthful. You'll never be able to see it. You'll never be able to, combat it. It's, the world has changed not for the better in terms of, information control and dissemination. And, marketing has been freaking weaponized worldwide, not just in the bike industry and everything. And it's worse, as an aside to mountain bikes and technology, it's worse for the human race, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that the truest way of actually convincing customers is to actually get them on the bike.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah. And see the operative word here, if they like it.
Yeah.
Because maybe they won't. Maybe they just want to sit in the saddle and pedal through routes, and they want something that's kind of mushy and wallowy, and they don't care because they're never going to leave the ground.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I think the people from like demo drivers, or the demo guys working at these events and giving out bikes and setting them up, they're really it's underestimated how important they are, and how they need to understand a bike and the kinematics and how to set it up. Because if you also do testing with humans, the feedback they provide is cryptic. Like they can't address I did some testing with Fox back in the days with the Athertons in La Fenasosa in Spain.
Yep.
And we set up like a timed free lap system, and Brown was the name of the engineer I was working with. And then this is like maybe
Will Brown?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. He's one of the
and then he was like, okay, when you come down the trail and you want to change something, don't name the stuff you want to change rather than just explain what you feel or what you want.
Yeah.
And this left a very big impression on me, because the track there is somewhat there flat spots and sandy, like there's no berm or something. So you're going into it, unless you really go to the front and you have your front wheel like washing out or wandering, you understeer. And I was like, I maybe need like the front a little bit softer to lower it, to get my center of mass on the front wheel and generate more traction. And he was laughing at me, and it's like, it's so counterintuitive. We make your rear end harder. And then he explained, okay, because then I would shift the geometry forward, and the forces go into the fork in the kinematics of the rear end of the bike, wouldn't like dip me backwards, squatting, and it would like, this moves my center of mass rearward. So I unloaded my front while going through the turn. And so he made it harder, shifted me to the front. It's insane. I always like to tell this story because it's counterintuitive often, and you underestimate your ability to name or address the particular setting on a shock, rebound, compression. Sometimes it's just the other one. You think you need more compression but you need less rebound damping.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I always say, the way I used to like to say it to people is just speak to me like a patient, not like a doctor. Give me your symptoms. Don't give me
Yeah, that's good.
the diagnosis. Like, just tell me your symptoms. You know, you did a great example. Like, it's so hard for people to separate the difference when they're tuning a rear shock, like between low speed compression and high speed rebound. And like, so many people will be like, "Oh, I'm coming into this bermed corner out of this G out, and I have no front traction. I'm like spinning out. You know, my front wheel's just pushing. And like, I have like, you know, I need more low speed compression. Like, I got to hold the bike up more." I'm like, nah, yeah, okay, maybe. Or maybe you got too much high speed rebound and the bike is just stuck in its travel and you can't get up enough to get forward.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I mean, hard to tell unless you can kind of really, unless you have mechanisms, that you can kind of test specifically to isolate one versus the other, which, you kind of learn as a test rider, as a good test rider, you can, where to look for each of them,
And then it starts at the point where you need to explain what high speed and low speed is, and people, it sounds so stupid, but sometimes it's a misunderstanding of like going fast. It's like then it's fast suspension, like high speed compression. But no, wait a second. Or going slow, low speed. No, we're talking shaft speeds.
It's so crazy to me, man. Like the amount of people's bikes that I touch, especially that have adjustable dampers, which by and large I think should be pretty much banned, and like just have, four-way adjustable dampers, like should just be for the top level racing, like almost just let mechanics deal with it. And even then some, don't really have all the tools needed to like get them tuned. But the amount of people that have their high speed compression turned way too high. Like, man, it's crazy. Let's say almost always people have their high speed compression just cranked up way too high. And the bike doesn't go through the bumps. It won't track anything. And they're like, the only way you make it work is literally to go faster.
This is the problem. Like the thing is, I want to have the settings of Gwyn. Like we had that quote back a couple of years at Eurobike.
You can't go fast enough to ride it. You can't do it.
Yeah. And then if you dial it all in, and it's just like, it's rarely working. And it is, I took my girlfriend because we were like, she was already, when we came together, she was always already in her 30s. So never really been into bikes, but into like horseback riding. But like always, when you get to know each other, you try to like get the other person into your own hobby, right?
Yeah.
So we struggled to find a track for her that she can learn on easily without being too scared. So it was kind of hard, and like long story short, in the end we went to Whistler.
Oh shit.
And then it was the good thing about Whistler is you may never been on these kind of tracks, but like the tracks like Ease does it.
I've ridden Easy does it. Yeah, I've ridden with people on that.
It's super wide. You can look far ahead. There's nothing like scaring you. And she worked herself up in 1 week. And at the end of the week, she was able to do top of the world.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty impressive, actually.
It's not like a 18-minute ride like the track record is, but she made it, and she was able to. And the interesting part is when I follow her in a bike park, I try to protect her, and because she's like super focused, and if like a youngster, fast rider, whatever, is approaching her and just making noises, she's getting like scared. So I'm riding behind her and watching and ensuring nobody is like trying to do a cut in or whatever. But when I use my settings and I'm heavier and I'm usually I'm a faster rider, my settings work differently. And then if I'm trying to go slow on them, I almost go over the bar sometimes, because if I go over a rock, I would just like.
Yeah, you need to hit hard to get through. Exactly.
And then
that's why we talked. I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but like riding downhill bikes for me today, it's like I just can't go. I can't go fast enough for a full run to really do it.
Yeah.
Like I just physically can't exert that kind of energy, that kind of strength to like really ride the bike at the level that you need to ride it at to like make it work.
Yeah.
And like you can't just soften it up and make it work. It doesn't work that way. Like you can't even get through the stiction and the fork. Like,
yeah. I think we saw a shift a couple of years ago. Before that, in the bike park, you would always see downhill bikes only. And
Yes.
slowly enduro bikes crept in. And I think even though the tracks might be suited for a downhill bike, if you go fast, people can more easily maneuver an enduro bike because they know the bike, they're riding it on their regular trails, they have a perception of what's happening if they like lean the bike or whatever, if they're jumping it, and all of a sudden you would be on a bike riding it 3 times a year in a downhill setting, in a downhill bike park, and it would be overwhelmed because it's so different. It's like driving a race car, maybe.
Yeah. I think having the single crown on there too helps so much, you know, it just flexes more. It's just so much more comfortable of a bike to ride. A $170 bike in that range.
And the thing is, not only strength-wise on a downhill bike, but everything is happening so much faster. It's because the information you need to process while riding it and estimating if this rock is relevant or not is so different.
I mean, like, just for an example, Jens, like I've been recently working on some dual idler, mid-travel, a bunch of e-bikes, stuff like that. Like that, the whole system is getting rolled out across across partners, and that first DH bike I did for Pivot, the geometry of that bike, suspension of that bike, all that stuff that I did is laid out for racing. It's not, it wasn't like conceived for going to the bike park. I wasn't thinking about that at all.
Yep.
It was just drawing on, feedback from all of the different companies that I've worked with on, in World Cup downhill, and, trying to put the best product, the best race bike together I possibly could for today. Like, that's the whole, the purpose of it. It's not the decisions that I'm making, that I'm, on the products that I'm working on now, which I would say visually you would look at them and say like, wow, that's really freaking similar looking. Like how what's the difference, whether it's a DW Link or an Orion or whatever, like the reality is the mid-travel products are really different from a feel standpoint. Like and it's not just the mid pivot layout or any of that stuff. It's the flex profile of the frame, it's where the pivots are located to how we're going to let it flex. It's all a completely different setup, just more compliant, more forgiving. I mean, World Cup downhill bikes aren't there to make the rider's strengths better. They're there to make up for the rider's weaknesses. It's a very different, I think it's a different way of thinking about the about the problem, but that's the way I've always approached it, is that I'm going to rely on the rider to do what they do to the best of their ability. Like, say, Stevie Smith, nobody's going to go faster than Stevie through a big rock garden straight line. Doesn't matter. He's just going to do it. Like, he was just going to do it. It didn't make a difference. And if he thought somebody else was going to go faster, he would just go faster. Like, there's nothing I can do to help him there. I can't fix that. I can't make it. Yeah. I can't give him 1% more, improvement there. But there's other places where I can really help. And really, like for Stevie, like we'll just use him as an example, low speed corners, like helping Stevie get into low speed corners and get out of low speed corners. Like that was a place where he could use help, and, would help him, and, on the end, it's up to him 100% to do the work, like the bike is just a freaking tool. It's not like the bike don't go down the course on its own and I can't ride the bike. Like the rider's got to do it. But, if you can help them out a little bit, that could be that extra 0.5% they need to be the fastest person that day.
And flex is something that it's somehow sitting in the dark as a topic.
Yeah.
But how you go into a berm and you preload the bike, and then using this kind of let's say it's a spring, like a ski, you preload the bike and it helps you like to change direction. And I've ridden so many different bikes, and I had like in the last 15 years, and I had bikes that I'm kind of heavy. When I was like trained, I had 210 pounds, 220. So I was able to put a lot of force in a corner into the bike. and make it help stand up again, like
Yeah.
popping it out of a berm, like getting the grip and you transferring the load into the ground. And then I lost weight and I got hurt at some point and I got slower and weaker and I couldn't preload those stiff bikes anymore.
Yeah.
And then you just you go into a berm and then you can't ride out of it because you can't, like, you need to proactively lift the bike.
Yeah.
It's an odd movement to describe. It's something out of your shoulders to your hips.
Yeah, your shoulders and your hips, right? And you're kind of pushing through it. I mean, that's exactly what I was talking about earlier about not being able to ride the downhill bike hard enough to really make it work.
Yep.
Like, it just feels like shit in the corners. Like, you can go fat. It's fine going straight lines, but like coming in and out of corners is just so slow, just so out of control. It's just can't ride it hard enough to make it work. Just can't get it. Can't get it to flex. Can't get it to pop. Just can't get it in and out, you know?
And in most races, you win in the corners.
Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely.
So
the entrance to the corner is everything. Like, it's the beginning of the corner. You win the race there. That's it.
Yeah,
Unless there's something like completely ridiculous section, right? Like, we'll just take those out of the equation where someone's straight lining some, huge section or some insane move that,
just like this weekend at Mount Sadan.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
still, if all day there are people going so close and you go off the brakes, you tuck, and then you're hauling ass. But still, like, there are, I don't know the numbers, but there are still 30 corners, 40 corners. And if you make up like 0.2 seconds in every corner, that's a big amount. There is a couple of seconds over the whole distance of a track.
Absolutely.
And this makes more sense than like making it work like splendid on the straights, because you can't make up on the straights on that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's possible to win a race in the rock garden either. Like, I don't think straight line speed is possible in the bumps. Like, it's not that big of a difference unless you have like every freaking low speed corner is preceded by some giant rock garden. Which point, maybe, maybe. But that'd be a weird track. Then we might just build a bike for that track. I'll say, kind of your comment. Like, I think tuning of flex has been something that's come more to light recently in the media because there are things that are like visibly you can see on some bikes. Some companies are kind of catching up now and starting to do it. But I was very, very actively doing this back in the Sunday days. I mean, there's 3 holes in the yoke of the chainstay yoke, and I literally drilled those by hand initially to tune the stiffness of that chainstay yoke in. Like, been doing it forever. Like, the first Evil carbon downhill bike, like, that was a massive stiffness study. Huge. Like, I'm talking like months and months of effort. Like, it's just not something that, I'm out publicizing necessarily, and I'm sure there are other people thinking about, frame flex and stiffness. And I mean, I know for sure that like there were prototypes from partners that I rode that I was like, whoa, like this thing, like this one can't go to market. Like, we got to do some work here because, it's one way or the other, So it's something that's discussed. I mean, I think a lot of times, like, I know that some people that I've worked with in the past have just kind of taken the like, oh, hey, we have the stiffest bikes. Like, our bikes are the stiffest. They're the best.
Oh, Jesus.
Like, yeah, they're the best. We have the stiffest bike. Like, I'm going to make
this number. It's a number because you have 250 horsepower, 500 horsepower, whatever, and you have 50 more, you're better, right? So, no.
Exactly. But that's not the truth. I mean, it's
in World Cup racing, I think it was Commensal. They openly testing it right now. They have like they bolt stuff in the rear end to stiffen it up.
I mean, you can see it like with Mondraker, with Commensal. Now you can see visually what's happening, whereas all of that testing and all of that development that's been done, at least on my side over the years, like, it's invisible. Like, you don't know that it's happening. It's happening. It's just not there for the whole world to see. Like, open booking it. Like, But I'm sure that most anybody would probably prefer to not have their results of their testing, just being like photographed by every journalist and shared with the, the rest of their competition every week.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know that they have from literally an engineering implementation standpoint, an option. Like, kind of stuck with, there's some element that just has to be visible, there's really no way around it.
And the same goes with mass dampers now.
Yeah.
It starts to pop up now, and then people start discussing it.
We'll see. I would ask the question with mass dampers, what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah.
And what are the trade-offs? Like, I saw a fucking hilarious one the other day where, like, somebody had a mass damper on the damn frame on the, like, front triangle, like, on the sprung mass, which was fucking... I mean, yeah, that's funny. It's funny. I mean, I hope they have a uranium slug in there, because it's got to be pretty damn heavy to be on the sprung mass.
I think
that's ridiculous, man. That's just ridiculous.
There's a joke going around like 20 years ago, putting gerbils into a shock, the gerbil damping gerbils kind of thing. It was super funny. But
I laughed out loud when I saw the mass damper on the front triangle. I literally laughed. It's just uncontrollably. It just like
it. I mean, funny. Being serious now, it's good that people try out new things. Even though it's odd at some point.
At least have a sense of the technology you're working with. Like, you know, it would be super cool if I tried to fill a damper with water and put it on the freaking bike. Like, you know, like what? Yeah, sure. Like, it's trying new things, but that's an asinine experiment. Like I said, I mean, the thing better have a slugger uranium. It's got to be like 800 grams or something, you know, to like. Yeah. And I would just ask, like, again, what are you trying to achieve? What's the benefit? And then what's the compromise?
There should be a lot of, in my opinion, there should be more blind testing involved. Because if you have like something voodoo, juju, how you say that, and on your bike, and you see it, sometimes your mind is messing with you. Because you have it. It's like having the dial on the shock, like you said earlier. Exactly. Having 4 dials, and you think, oh, that's got to be the best thing ever. But eventually, you may not even be able to notice the difference.
Let's just say, for argument's sake, that we could use a mass damper on the unsprung mass and cancel out some sort of resonance at some frequency that was beneficial. The total percent change in lap time, dude, got to be well under 1%. Mm-hmm. But if the rider who's riding the bike thinks that is somehow some huge advantage, that could be worth 10%.
Yeah, sure.
So
confidence, yeah.
I think it's really comes down to what the rider believes and how much that helps them go faster on that day. Because in World Cup downhill, it's all about the rider. It's all about the rider. It's 100% on them, basically. Like, the bike is a tool. We can give them the best tool possible, but doesn't mean the best tool is going to win. I mean, hell, like, it's just, look at F1. It happens all the time. Like, dudes just have a flyer of a weekend and go off and put a car that people are like, wait, what? How's that? How's the Williams up there right now? What happened? Mm-hmm. You know, like, it happens every weekend. Somebody pulls off some crazy drive, you know? It might be from 20th place up to 10th, and it doesn't necessarily make the headlines of the TV feed, but, you know, people are like, whoa, wait, both Haas's are in the top 10. How? What happened? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, stuff like that. Like, comes down to the person, the pilot.
And it's easier to say, okay, we got this mass damper, this voodoo stuff going. Maybe it's easier for people to actually think it's just the material rather than a mind game.
Yeah, I think there's some element of marketing. I think there's some element of rider confidence. And, you know, I mean, perhaps in certain situations, there's some element of balancing out some, you know, modal frequency if you have a detriment there in your product. But, you know, you can't just, it's not like as simple as like, we're going to use a mass damper on every bike in the future. You know, it's just absolutely going to work because, you know, it helps every product. Like, different leverage ratios, different frame stiffnesses, different tire carcasses, different pressures, different inserts, different spoke tensions, different spoke angles.
You name it.
Hub flange diameter, freaking unsprung mass of the drivetrain at the rear wheel. All of these things are monumentally important in terms of what's actually how we're generating traction. And mass damper works or doesn't work, or, you know, could be better or worse, depending on all of those different things.
And it's a compromise, always.
Always. It doesn't solve every problem. Like, it's going to induce problems, and same thing like every other thing that we do, you know, like everything we do, it's always a compromise. Like, you can always tell if someone's just completely faking it when they say this is no compromise. This is the greatest freaking thing. You know, this is our best bike ever. You know, No compromises. Like, yep. Yeah, you guys nailed it. Holy shit. Congratulations, man. Nice.
Yeah.
You did it.
And yeah,
We're all
just
done. Pack it in, boys. Shut down the company. They'll do it with no compromises.
Yeah, we finished the game. Yeah, like we're the
That's
winner.
it. It's all over.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think innovation never stops. And then at some point, I wonder how bikes would look like in 20 years or 30 years, if it is still a thing.
Be interesting.
And then maybe just think back 30 years. Talking about myself, I had a blast riding them.
Hell yeah.
And then if you pull something similar out, or you still own the bike and it's sitting somewhere in your shed, and you just drive to the grocery store, or ride to the grocery store on it, you would just like, oh my god, I won't go down any stairs on that one. And you send it for jumps and loading ramps, dropped it like until it broke.
That's so true. Dude, before we sold our house, I had an Imperial SL, a trade show bike from 2003. It was like a perfect bike and I had it in my basement forever, like just stored, And I was like, I pulled it out and I was going to box it up, and I was like, now I'm going to take this thing for a rip. And I pumped up the tires. Everything's good. It's got tubes in it, So like whatever, just pumped them up. Freaking straightened out the bars. I'm like, wow, let's go. Oh, dude. That thing hurt. I was thinking about that exact thing. I'm like, I used to ride these freaking bikes literally down, at Killington, at Mount Snow, like, down the most gnarly downhill trails. And like, I'm riding this thing in my like cul-de-sac trying to do a freaking 180, And like, I'm feeling like, oh my God, I'm paralyzed right now. Like, I'm definitely going to be feeling this tomorrow.
100%.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's absolutely hilarious.
This thing is just a pain instrument. Like,
yeah. I sometimes I'm like unhappy that I haven't have photos from back in the days. It started like about 2000 when I had the first photos, but before we had no clue. In the 90s, we had no clue what we were doing. But we had a blast.
It was awesome. Yeah, we were just making it up as we went. We literally were making our own bikes, like making our own stuff to like be able to make, not even just to make the thing better, just to get through the weekend. Like, I mean, chain guides, like, it's funny. I was talking with Nigel about this recently, Nigel Page, and like talking about chain guides, and like, dude, born out of necessity, just couldn't get through a race weekend. Had to make it. Just couldn't afford to buy another MRP. Just couldn't afford it. Had to make something.
Yeah, it's crazy. And now we have like it's spaceships, it's rocket ships.
Yeah, I find it incredible that kids riding downhill today have no concept of how like frustrating and shitty it was to deal with chain guides every single time you rode. Like,
I was building. I had a Da Vinci Wilson at some point, the light version, just before Stevie came on. The former version, it was 4 kilos
with the shock on the top
light.
tube and all that. Yeah. Oh man, yeah.
It rode incredible. And if you go around the corner, the rear end had so much flex. I never felt so confident anymore on a bike drifting. It's insane. But it was the screws holding up the rear end was sawing off the material of the seat tube. So much flex was in there.
That's crazy.
And but it was eye-opening, that bike back then. It was so funny. And
I rode that bike.
I was going on a race with that bike because you mentioned chain guides, putting it together, so stoked, doing my race run, and in the middle of the track my chain got sucked into the chain guide, like completely blocking everything.
It's the worst.
And now today it's just like so simple. You have this tiny piece, and it just works.
Just works. Yep.
Lovely.
Yeah. Imagine the idea of just actually physically guiding the chain onto the sprocket.
My mother was a tailor.
Oh yeah, cool.
Sewing clothes, and I was into bikes and losing my chain on the 3x. So I went with the thread.
The spool?
The spool. I was this plastic spool thingy. And I try to figure ways to use the spool on the chainstay to guide somewhat the chain.
That's a pretty cool idea.
But it's like, again, like, yeah, 35 years back.
Oh man,
That's insane. Yeah, technology
I mean,
came a
dude,
long
even
way.
like the stepped idler, like the whole dual ring chain guides, which is kind of a dead thing now, but like the whole stepped idler, which was a big E13 thing, like fucking made it. We just made it. It wasn't like preconceived. We just literally were building stuff to like figure out this problem. We're like, and like literally built the stepped idler, put it on, and we were like, oh, maybe the chain can get up there. And man, it was like magic. It like went up and down. We're like, whoa, this is like actually really freaking cool. Like this actually works. Like this is pretty badass. Like totally just got, making stuff in the machine shop. It's like
insane.
Crazy to think.
Amazing times back then. Amazing times now. We have rocket ships to ride down the trail.
Truth.
And thank you for like constantly and never losing your momentum on pushing things forward, I would say.
Well, thank you, Jens. It's high praise, and especially, you know how much respect I have for you and everything that, not only as a writer, but as a technical, as one of the most technical and most technically capable editors ever. I
Thank you.
very, very much appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, dude, hey, if you don't get better, you're getting worse. So, we just got to keep working on getting better and keep pushing it and keep trying to learn. And, that's it, really. And I think I'm just going to keep doing that until I can't do it any longer.
Yeah, that's a wrap. Thank you again.
Thank you, buddy.
And don't forget to subscribe for more nerd content like this.